Order the meeting of the KBE United We Learn and Teaching and Learning Committee. I'll now call the roll. Holly Bloodworth, Lee Todd,
Here.
Julie Pyle,
Here.
Alyssa Riley,
Here.
Jamie Bowling,
Here.
Patrice McCrary,
Here.
Joanne Adams here, Erin Thompson. Our first agenda item on our agenda is the local laboratories of learning. And we have KDE Division Director David Cook and KDE Program Manager Sarah Snipes to provide that update.
Okay.
Oh,
So, Karen, would you like just to go first, or is Penny not on yet? Penny's not on yet. We are ahead of schedule, so it looks like oh, that's okay.
yeah.
How often does that happen? That we're ahead.
Not people. Very rarely are we ahead of schedule, so we will celebrate.
All right. Thank you.
Penny's online. Is he there?
Somebody would be in a few minutes. I don't know if you
Hey, Karen, I think Penny is online now.
want us to go first.
Yeah,
why don't you all go first?
Yeah.
I saw her pop on.
Yeah.
So we will have our Kentucky United We Learn Council update then. That would
Absolutely.
be Karen Dodd and Penny Christian.
Good afternoon. Penny, are you with us? Are you able to?
I'm here. I'm sorry, you all. I'm here.
You can hear
I'm in
me.
the mountains and I'm at the mercy of snow and signal. So, but yes, the background is not where I am. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all for having us here. We did have our third convening of the Kentucky United We Learn Council in November. And so we're just going to give you a brief overview of what that was all about. But just to give you a little bit of background, I will be turning it over to Penny in a moment. But as far as membership goes, we aim to have a membership between 55 and 70 members, which is a really big number. Right now, we did have, I want to say about 20 people drop off at the end, but we were at our high end. We had about 75 members when throughout the first year. And so by losing about 20, we decided to go ahead and recruit a few other folks. So that brings us to 55 members currently. I'm sorry, you can go to the next slide. We have our chair, who is Audrey Gilbert. She is a former student. And then Penny Christian is our vice chair, and that is who joins me today. And we have our vice chair is also the chair-elect. So come April, Penny will take over as chair, and we will have elections for a new vice chair. We continue to have 3 standing committees: the Vibrant Learning Experiences team, Accelerating Innovation, especially in regard to assessment and accountability, and Building a Bold New Future. We had a 2-day convening, and so I will turn it over to Penny now. She'll go through the agenda for the 2 days and then talk a little bit about the work that was done during those days. Penny?
Is my volume okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Karen. The beginning of our convening, we have our committees share out. Over the last year, especially since our April convening, our standing committees were hard at work. They meet monthly. Some meet monthly, and once school year gets into things, and then you have summer, you can't always have your entire committee meet, but work was done. Some was done via email. Most of it was done via our committee meetings. I am on VLE, and we meet as regularly as we can. And these share outs were designed to inform the rest of the council of exactly what the committees have been doing in said meetings. As far as VLE is concerned, and I'll give a very brief overview of VLE. As far as vibrant learning experiences, we went on field trips, right? Different areas of the Commonwealth and different pockets where people identified what vibrant learning experiences could possibly look like. So we would share those out in all of the committees. They went into as much depth as we could to discuss what we were doing, where we are in our tasks, and where we were moving forward. The biggest thing I think it's the biggest thing of that Thursday convening was finalizing the moonshot, which is our vision, right? So that's that big target. What are we aiming for? What is going to be our focus? The moonshot, Lou Young loves her analogies and her metaphors, but what the moonshot really did is it put in perspective the importance of what we're doing. Do we work in the minutia? Do we operate big picture? Some of the committee share outs indicated that there were some similarities just as far as local authority and what's being done locally, but also they deal in the minutia. So you bring all of this together, and how can we incorporate all of that into our moonshot, and how does it really design what that moonshot is? So the council's vision came into play, and that took a lot of conversation. How do we condense all of these ideas and all of these needs we feel are necessary and make it that one big moonshot? And then the journey mapping activity, and I'm going to tap Karen here because journey mapping, it was very informative, a little intense, but Karen, if you want to share the leadership role, the sample that we used before we had everyone do it as committees.
So I don't know if any of you have ever participated in journey mapping. What it is, it's taking a look back at the work that you've done and it's putting it on a timetable. So we looked at the work that was done over the past year and asked folks to think about what were the key things that happened. So it could be events, it could be a deliverable, and then the whole team comes together and you kind of grade your own engagement or satisfaction during those key points. So the leadership team actually did this before we met with, and when I say leadership, I'm talking about the council leadership. They came together and we did this ahead of time to say, what do we think is working well? What's not working well? Where do we feel really engaged in the work and maybe not so engaged? Then we opened it up. We shared our experience pardon me, with the rest of the members, and then asked them by committee to do the same thing. So I think it was really enlightening to a lot of folks, first of all, just to kind of look at all the work that's been accomplished, to see that on a timeline spread out. We had huge pieces of paper up on the walls. Everybody could put cards up there for the kind of work that was going on. And then they take little stickies, and above the timeline is where you kind of grade, I was really engaged or not so engaged. So you've got different stickies going up and down along the timeline. That allowed us, after the event, while they all went into committee time, we were able to look at those and say, okay, so what are we really seeing here? What does this tell us about the engagement from all members of the council? Penny?
Yeah, it was informative, wasn't it? It was.
Yeah.
It was informative. We definitely saw some trends. So then we broke out again into committee time, and that wasn't necessarily to take on a new task. But after we did the committee share outs at the beginning, committees came back and thought, okay, based on what we've seen with this journey mapping and based on the moonshot, what could possibly be our next steps and how do we address what we saw with the journey mapping, right? Were there some situations? So one of the things that we talked about a lot was attendance and engagement at the meetings and the committee meetings. How does the committee address, say, low absenteeism in a 2 or 3 month span, or say like with VLE, and we went on field trips when you only have 3 or 4, and how do you make sure that you engage the other ones who could not attend? So what the journey mapping actually did was it held us accountable, right, to what we had done well and what we didn't necessarily do well at all. So, and then that's what we discussed in committee time. Next slide, please. So Friday. Woo! Friday was fun. So what you see there is working groups. Those are not our subcommittees, right? What we determined based on feedback, based on journey mapping, based on everything, and based on the moonshot, Friday was really designed to get us going. And how do we proceed? How do we advance this work? So the working groups, and we'll identify those working groups, you got to choose based on your passion, based on your direction, based on what you didn't necessarily feel you knew enough about, right? Those working groups come together that morning and going into lunch to really focus on high level work, not just subcommittee work. Anyone from any committee could be in the working groups. And those were led by leadership. Each one was facilitated by 2 members of leadership. And I and Donnie Tran, myself and Donnie Tran, we did the moonshot. Julie Powell, if you're on here, she was in there for that. It was some great conversation. But the working groups, those were intense. And when we get to the specifics of those working groups, you'll understand why. So after that intense morning of identifying and joining these working groups, we had our 1-year celebration. Karen Dodd.
Oh, you want me to talk about that? Okay. I'll wait till we get to the next slide because I've got a slide for that.
Okay, great. Okay. So we have a 1-year celebration about, this cool council. What is this big thing that has come into play, and how do we celebrate all the hard work that's been done, the convenings, the meetings, all of the things that we think we've done. We talk about L3, everything that's been done to advance this work. We just felt that there was a need to pause and celebrate that. And then the working groups, they shared out after that. One of the working groups, as I said, was Moonshot. What I appreciate about the Moonshot working group was not just that everyone had something, to contribute during the conversation, but also the understanding that this Moonshot, this council's vision, is going to drive this work. And how do we make sure we're so intentional about making sure that everyone who needs to buy into this is going to buy into it. So then we have the panelists offer reflections. We had a group of people come in, and I may have Karen at some point mention specifically, there's a slide on the panelists' feedback. The panelists were embedded in the groups. They were embedded at tables, they were embedded in our conversations, and they got a chance to not necessarily participate to that extent, but to really listen and watch and see what work was done. Yes, they were all, of course, if they had a question or wanted to participate, they could. But it was interesting to have them embedded in our work and listening. And some were nod, some were very thoughtful. So that's what we did with the bulk of our day.
And then on the next slide is, oh, wow, that is really hard to read. Sorry about that. So during the 1-year celebration, we had a QR code up on the screen, and we asked everybody to get on their phones and just enter into an app words that resonate with them about what has been happening over the last year. And so it came out into a Wordle, and these are the words that really, and I can only see the big ones, so the ones that really stuck out were local accountability, L3 districts, collaboration, inclusion, that's about all relationships. I can't read very many from here, but it was really interesting to see. I think donuts is up there somewhere.
Donuts is up there.
It was fun.
Extended metaphors.
I'm sorry.
And no, I was just trying to show some ones you couldn't read. I was just going to throw. You're fine. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Evolving, connecting, friendships, heard, student experience, coalitions, real change, and common vision are some of the words that you can't see.
Yeah. So I think it was a good activity, and it just gave everybody a chance to mix and mingle a little bit of downtime while all the heavy work was going on over these 2 days.
Yeah.
You can go to the next slide, Meredith. Thanks.
Okay, so our moonshot, and this is a draft. It has to be approved by our full council, and it's to build a prosperous Kentucky. We will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all our learners. I think one of the most important words here is prosperous. We were very intentional about using this verbiage because we understand that at some level, at some point, legislation will be involved, right? So Frankfurt, more than just KDE, is going to be involved, and our stakeholders, our business community, how are they going to look at what we think about education? So I think as far as building a prosperous Kentucky, we did address that. We'll launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all our learners. Sometimes, if you look all the way back at when Commissioner Glass, former Commissioner Glass, had the listening sessions, so much of the feedback had to do with students and families who did not feel that this education system was working for them. So when we talk about meaningful and useful, we are looking to create a system where every child feels that they have a place, a purpose, and that they have their own vision and dreams for what they want as far as coming out of our school systems. Next slide, please. So VLE, we drafted a definition of what vibrant learning truly is. And it's learning that matters to students, right? So in partnership with families and communities, students are agents of their own learning, engaged in relevant, authentic, and joyful learning opportunities. Vibrant learning honors students' cultural wealth, gifts, and interests. Vibrant learning culminates in the application of knowledge and skills demonstrated through personalized products. And some things that jump out here for me: engaged in relevant, authentic learning opportunities, right? Let's go back again to those listening sessions. Yes, we've all said, you know, when am I going to use algebra in my adult life? Well, it goes deeper than that, right? For personally, me, my math, no. My daughter is in culinary school, and she had the skills test this week in the kitchen. And guess what she had to use? So much geometry, so much pre-algebra. And she's like, wow, I guess I am going to have to use this. But was it relevant when she took it? Because she hated it. She's like, when am I going to do this and why do I need it? So when we talk about authentic, we talk about this need for educators to relate to our students, that it's not just, you don't just have to learn this to take a test. This will apply to you at some point in your life and you're going to be the better for it. And also, vibrant learning honors students' cultural wealth. When we talk about equity, this is what drives that conversation. Students' cultural wealth means you have students sometimes from, you can have a refugee family, you can have families from Eastern Kentucky where the parents, quote unquote, will never enter the building. But are you honoring the fact that culturally they just feel like, you know what, the educators are in control, I'll catch them when they get home, and that's their space? And how do you honor that and meet these babies where they are, as they are, not with the expectation that things have to change for them to have these vibrant learning experiences? Next slide, please. So our working groups, Portraits of a Learner. Everyone, of course, now at this point has heard about Portraits of a Learner. So what is the question here? What is the Kentucky United We Learn Council's role in supporting the implementation of Portraits of a Learner? That's not clear yet, right? That's not clear. Karen, do you want to talk about that at all? Or if...
Well, these are the ones where we don't have definitive answers yet. So those first two working groups actually produced something. The rest of this is ongoing work. So that was why I just put questions in here. It's kind of the questions that these groups are grappling with.
Yes, as well as engaging communities. A lot of conversation when we did our community committee share outs, and when we did our journey mapping. It says, how do we ensure a diverse representation, which is critical to identifying strategies that serve students well? Engaging communities, a lot of it had to do with the business communities. How do we make sure that everyone we need to buy in is not only represented, but we bring them to the table and they have a voice, right? So that's what that was about. Next slide, please. Accelerating innovation, system of systems. Karen, you're so much better at system of systems than I am.
I actually usually turn this one over to Jennifer Stafford.
Right.
So, how do we create an accountability system that includes local innovations through a menu of options, which honors students, streamline state testing, local adaptability, support vibrant learning, and encouraging collaboration? So this is really the ongoing work of the council, is trying to figure out how all of this will fit together, how we will honor both students and recognize that districts have differences and they should get credit for the kinds of differences that they have in helping students.
And our council charter. This group this group had a large charge. So the question, what protocols do we establish for the Kentucky United We Learn Council that outline rules, processes, and procedures while keeping member engagement at the forefront? So, most of us are part of organizations where you have bylaws, standing rules, right? So our council charter is going to drive the work that we do. So we do so in good faith, that our hands are clean, and we operate with integrity. So the protocols for voting, like we have to approve our definition of VLE, we have to approve our moonshot. How do we do that? Do we have to be in person? Are we allowed to do so via Google Docs or email? All of these things, what does quorum look like? All of these things come into play just to make sure that we move forward with fidelity, and that we make sure and ensure that engagement is at the forefront, but not only that engagement is at the forefront, but that we are the most effective in what we do.
And
Next slide, please.
This was the
Oh,
group
sorry,
that
go ahead, Karen.
the group that I oversaw, maybe not surprising to some of you. We are still working through that charter. And like Penny just said, voting in particular, it kind of went out of our minds that we should think about the fact that these are open meetings. So just like you all have open meetings here, all voting has to happen on meetings like this. So we have to go back and make some edits to our charter to reflect the fact that we're on open meetings, and we have to honor all of that.
So panelist feedback, and this is what we discussed, what I mentioned earlier as far as the panelists being embedded in our work. Some of the comments, and you all can read, so I don't have to just read them verbatim to you, but the importance of communication and clarity, and to know what you are asking for. I say the same thing about the workforce in different industries. They have their own language and their own views. And so if we are not clear on how it fills into Kentucky's economy for prosperity, then you're not going to have the buy-in. And that goes straight to our moonshot, right? That whole prosperous community aspect. We got some great feedback. They did share with us at the convening as well, rather than we don't just have it here written, but they shared the importance of being welcomed to the table and hearing some of the things that they heard. They were very positive. They were hopeful, and that's all we can ask for at this point, right? Is to be hopeful, and that buy-in is what we get and is what we receive from everything that we do. Karen, are you next? Or you want to stop here for a second?
Oh, no, I was just going to add that we asked some external people to come in, and we really wanted to focus on those decision makers who are not part of the council to just kind of listen to what it was that we're doing, especially with these work groups where we're really diving into this kind of work, and to just be there to listen as our members talked about the work that they're doing, and then give us their reflection on what they heard from us and how it ties into their work. And so the ones that we've highlighted here, Representative Tipton, we had John Ballard from the Senate, Amanda Ellis from CPE, Amanda Burrows is with one of our co-ops, and we had other co-op directors there as well. So we felt like it was really important that as we are going into year 2, that we are letting other folks know, other important decision makers know what it is that we're doing, and to just give us a little bit of feedback on that. So that's what this panel discussion was all about. You can go to the next slide, Meredith. So this is just a reminder that we do have a web page out there, and from the home page, you can click on United We Learn in the upper right-hand corner to get to the United We Learn page, which just has some general information about United We Learn. You can click on a link that's on the top left to get to the council's web page. And from there, you can get to any of the standing committees. We have all of their agendas, all of their minutes are out there. You can get to any of the recordings of any of the meetings that have happened. And we're in the process of putting all of our past newsletters on that site as well. So if you ever want to know what's going on, you can always go out there and read those. And then finally, we just had our next steps on the last page. Working groups will continue to meet along with the standing committees. We're looking over the feedback that we received from the convening to share that with all of our members and let them to talk about what changes may need to be made for year 2 as we move forward. And then our next convening will be here in Frankfurt in April. And that's all we have.
Thank you so much. It's always so exciting to hear what the council has come up with, and
just to look at all that has been accomplished and the goals that you have. It's just fabulous.
It's
So
a
thank you
big,
all so
it's a big
much.
lift.
Yes,
It's exciting work though. That we appreciate the time.
thank you.
Thanks, Penny.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from our local laboratories of learning, David Cook and Sarah Snipes.
Ms. Adams, before we go further,
Oh, sorry.
I think Dr. Todd had a question about the last
Oh, sorry.
presentation.
Yeah, I was impressed with the feedback from Representative Tipton.
Mm.
How many representatives have set in to see some of this activity? And what's their reaction to how different this is? I'm old enough to go back to the ungraded primary where you're changing the accountability system and people still want to see A, B, C, and D. And how are they buying into this work with the community to help develop this portrait of a learner? And how many representatives have taken the time to really sit in on some of these?
So Representative Tipton is the only one who accepted our offer to actually be a member, but he has been incredibly active
Yes.
in the council. I think Julie can even testify to that. He's been part of BNF, is that right? Yeah, he's on the BNF committee, so they're the ones really digging into policy. I think he's had, and I don't know, Meredith or Julie, if one of you want to speak to any comments that, I mean, his comments during the panel were very positive, and I think what we quoted in here is just making sure that we bring the legislators to the table, that we have those conversations with them before making any final decisions, so that, you know, they have an awareness of what's going on before we just put something in front of them. I think that's been probably the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, the one comment he made, because I think he presented a committee hearing and he said that was probably the first time most of the members of the committee had ever heard the term portrait of a learner.
It wasn't myself, but yeah.
There was, and so really getting the legislators to understand what we're doing and not make assumptions about what we're doing is really important. And he has been thoroughly engaged the whole time.
Yeah, and then we did have John Ballard there, of course, who was equally, I think, impressed with what we were doing, and basically said the same thing, just keep them informed of everything that's going on. So they're very interested in this work and just want to be brought in early.
I used to say, when we face some issues where you're trying to bring change, there's a power of the conversation that has to take place to
Absolutely.
fill in the void between PowerPoint presentations and meetings. And the more of that conversation you can have, the more likely you are to get agreement.
Yeah.
You need some kind of internal champions to.
And it's really, it's really why I think our members want those, what we're calling it a panel discussion, but, you know, to at least twice a year to bring in as many folks like that as we can. And they have been very vocal that they want legislators there because they want to know if we're on the right track and if they're going to support it.
Yeah. That's a vital piece of the deal. I commend him for taking the time to do it.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hello, Sarah Snipes from the Division of Innovation here at the Department of Education. I also want to welcome down two of our special guests today, Tracy Moracy, Superintendent of Greenup County Schools and L3 leader, as well as Josh Matthews, who works in Logan County Schools as Chief Academic Officer. I'm thankful that they've joined us today, both with long hauls of interstates to get here this afternoon with us to share a little bit about their journeys as L3 communities, and I think a perfect segue from the conversation around United We Learn. I was thrilled to see that L3s found their own kind of spotlight in the reflections of council members during that one-year celebration, because I do think that they're so central to those conversations. If we go back to 2020, we've been in this work quite a while now, and just thinking about the 7 districts that started the L3 journeys and being asked to really bring to the table tried and true solutions. If it's not our current system, what is it? Was essentially the big question for these communities. And we asked them to do this in a way that brought in their communities. Many of them partnered with community co-leaders to be a bridge to that community, do listening tours of their own, and really design solutions for challenges in those local communities based on the unique needs. So I'm thrilled to have Tracy and Josh here from Greenup and Logan because not only do they represent different regions of our state, but they have unique communities and contexts which they have designed around. I think what's also telling for these examples today are some of their similarities. So across unique contexts, you'll also hear similarities of what their communities express they need, as well as some differences. And so in their kind of earliest prototypes and iterations of this work, we're so excited to have an audience with you all to share what they've been so busy working on, and just want to give them space and time to share. So I think, Tracy, if you want to share a little bit about Greenup County.
Okay. So, I don't know if anybody actually has a link to the image. Look at that. Great. This is nice. Basically, we decided to put everything in one place. So we feel that the program really evolved from my initial work with the United We Learn when it first kicked off with a KCAE at that point. So I spent that first summer working with them and realized, okay, this is something that we need to be doing locally. So we used a lot of the model from that program, engaging our community. We engaged our community in our strategic plan. We engaged our community in what they wanted to see in a profile of a learner. And we engaged our community in wanting to know, what do you want us to be accountable for? Because what we found in these conversations, as was just mentioned, conversations are the key to making those connections and finding out what people really need. So the lack of formality in our meetings was very nice and productive. So we would have up to 50 people sometimes come in for our sessions to give us input. And we would have people that were from our kitchen staff, teaching staff. We had students in there, but then we'd also have the local IBEW union workforce. We would have our carpenters union. We had our judge exec. So we had a nice mix of different folks who had a different perspective about what education was needed in our community. We are very high poverty. We have very little jobs available to our students. Greenup County is the largest employer in our county, and we want to change that. We want to be a part of building it. Prosperous, I think, was mentioned in the last statement. That's the key. We have to be able to provide a place where companies want to come and invest. And we needed to do that with the collaboration of our community, because we need to know what kind of companies they wanted to see come. So both of those were key elements for us. What our big takeaway was, they really did not care about a test score. That was the big takeaway, in case you haven't heard that from someone else. We find them important. We know students need to take tests and do well to get certifications. We do not think that it's one size fits all. I'm a big fan of saying that if we need individualized learning plans, which is required in statute, we should have individualized assessment plans. Not all students need the same assessment. I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm saying let's differentiate like we ask our staff to do for our students, instead of all teaching to the same test. With that, we have chosen to put our profile of a graduate out there for everyone to inspect and look at, and we started tracking items. So we have something called a dashboard, which is a very familiar, popular concept right now, but if you would care to click on that, each 9 weeks, it's very similar to a quarterly report on steroids, is the best way I can explain it. Being a district who at once was in PLA status, we know the damage that can be done if you don't get those test scores where they need to be. But we also know the damage that can be done if you spend too much time focusing on it. If you become driven about numbers and data as opposed to needs. So we used our 4 pillars for our strategic plan. And we made sure that what the community gave us in those conversations fit into the data they were seeking, because they wanted more transparency. And so now we calculate everything from are you being greeted when you get out of the car in the morning to come into school with surveys to students, all the way to how many submissions they have into their profile of a graduate. We have a grade 8 at the high school. Our middle school is called the Core 4, so there is a transition. And this year we are working with our elementaries to create a 3rd grade through 5th grade program. We're kind of building it backwards, I guess, so that we can affect the most students. We also monitor our staff, such as attendance, level of knowledge, how many hours they're spending after school doing extracurriculars for students, because we all know the more that students are engaged, the better they're going to do in school, because they actually feel like they have a sense of belonging and a connection to someone. We have over 400 students who are being raised by grandparents right now. So those after-school wraparound programs are essential to making those students feel welcome and have another piece of belonging to the school. We also are working on what we're doing for our community. So students, which also does go in their profile of a graduate, what kind of community events and services are we offering? So that's where the gold standard community section comes in on this dashboard. And we monitor how many events are we holding to give back to the community? How is our social media going? Are they engaging? How are we disseminating information? What type of volunteer ideas do we have going on for our students to go out into the community and participate? And then our last one, of course, you want to go with your operations, because that was on our strategic plan. We needed to show we were taking their tax money in dollars and using it correctly. So we have made sure that they know how much we're spending, how many meals we're serving per 9 weeks, how many miles we're traveling, and they had no idea. And they did not know it wasn't funded. They were very shocked to realize that, a lot of that was a local fund and not necessarily coming from the state funding. So that just kind of, I hope I summarized that in under 10 minutes. Is that right?
Right.
But our big goal was to be very transparent with our community. If nothing comes of this, we at least built relationships. We built some amazing relationships, and because of that, we've been able to put students straight into work, even sometimes during the school day. I will get a call from United Steelworkers Union Hall, and they'll say, I need 4 boys who can weld for me. We can't get anybody to come to work. Can we work something out? And we will send them down. They will outwork everyone around them, and they're calling me the week before graduation saying, is there any way they could miss their graduation practice so that they could come on in so these gentlemen can get this stuff? Absolutely, we'll work it out. So it's really helped us understand what types of certifications are needed in our area, because what we have learned is what's considered acceptable on the state accountability side for certifications is not what the community wants. The community, certain fields require certain types of tests. So kids are getting certified based on what the state says counts for a test score. But then they're going and having to go back out and take more classes and pay for college classes to get the same certification with a different test, because we're not allowed to count that for our testing. So a lot of that happens between what a union wants and a non-union company wants. So we need some diversity there as well. Okay.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And Tracy brought up a point that I think you'll also hear about in Logan County's example, and something that emerged very quickly and I know is of interest to the board, is how Portrait of a Learner is showing up in these local models and systems of assessment and accountability. And so I think that shows up also at their district strategic planning level as well as an area of priority. So just wanted to lift that up as a trend we naturally saw emerge across our L3s, and our first 7 of which Logan County was part of. All 7 communities kind of lifted up Portrait of a Learner as a point of emphasis in that conversation as well. And now we see, as Tracy is a member of a later cohort as well, that kind of remains an area of priority for many communities, but we see a much more holistic picture of success and transparency within our communities. So thank you so much, Tracy. And Josh, pass it over to you for Logan County.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So in Logan County, and I want to piggyback just a second. And one of the things that we have done and worked very hard on is what we call the profile of success. And so that portrait of a learner that the state has introduced. We've done that in Logan County, and as we were thinking about this local accountability model, that profile of success is very important to our community. Our community really bought in and came to the table to create that. So we did not want to lose that. That is such an important element. So what we have tried to explain and what we have tried to show is that the profile of success, it really lives in our pillars. It lives in our local accountability system, because if you think about that performance assessment being the defense of learning, and that's the performance assessment of your profile, that we're measuring that as part of our local accountability system. So those pillars live, or that profile lives in what we call our pillars of success. So it is really important that we explain that this is not something new or an additional checkbox. This is actually something that goes very nicely together. So as we work through this, and you can go to kind of the next slide, again, we wanted to bring our teachers and our staff members to the table. And so as we were creating and thinking about this local accountability model, we wanted our teachers and our staff members at the table. What's important to us? What's important to us in Logan County? The other thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to try to keep it very simple. It's hard to explain to the general public where the numbers come from, and we wanted to try to kind of scale that down so that we could really explain to them, this is just what we're looking at. Here's where the numbers come from. That was an important to us in getting that relevant data. And then how often we're gonna share this thing out. And so for us, it was quarterly. And if you want to go to the next slide. And so the other thing that I think is really an important thing on here to talk about is when we talk about a local accountability system, we're not talking about less accountability. We're talking about more accountability. We're talking about more than just a state test score. That is one measure. And the state tests and those scores are important. They're a piece of what makes us and a piece of how we measure children, but it cannot be the only piece of how we measure children and how we measure the success of a district. And so when we were talking about this, I said, look, we're not trying to get less accountability. We're trying to get more accountability that's more transparent than anything that we've ever had. And so we went into our development really with that mindset, understanding that we're not going to score great on everything, but we're going to grow, and we want to be able to show that growth. If you want to go to the next slide. And so this is just a timeline of kind of what it looks like. I know that you all have heard from Dr. Kreisman at Fleming, and he's done a terrific job with his local accountability system. And so we were able to really partner with him in a lot of ways. And then we partnered with Cognia because we're an accredited school anyway. And they had a lot of the spreadsheets. They had a lot of the teaching and learning standards that were already valid and validated. And so we thought it was just a natural progression to partner with them. So if you want to go to the next slide. And so we came up with the Logan County Pillars of Success. And those are the 4 things that our LC Innovators, who is a team of innovative teacher leaders, that's what they came up with. And they wanted to measure performance. They wanted to measure readiness, and that's really where our profile of success lives. And then they wanted student growth. And it was really important that we looked at the student well-being. I don't think we talk about that enough, about ensuring that our students have a feeling of belonging, and there's a mentor there for them, and we're looking at attendance, those kind of things. One of the things that we're looking at too in student readiness is not just going to the CTC and checking off a box for for the state testing purposes, but really looking at students who are concentrators and what percentage of those are concentrators, and really getting prepared for that next step in life. So just little things like that. And as we know, the CT, the Career and Technical Funding is starting to look at some of that stuff. And so it's, again, I'll just go to, it really goes a little deeper than even what a state assessment would look at typically. All right, if you want to go to the next slide. And so it's kind of hard to see there, but I'll be more than happy to share these slides with you. But in the upper section, there's a little bit different color, and that's the measurements that our teachers wanted. They wanted percent of concentrators. They wanted percent of students that were in extracurricular or co-curricular activities. They wanted growth in terms of measuring growth in terms of our district assessment, like iReady or MAP testing. So those are the things that they said, this is important to us, and we expect, this is what we would like to see measured. And then they created rubrics that, to be honest with you, are really, really tough rubrics. I mean, it's hard to get a 4 on our rubric in some of those categories. And then the other color kind of below, that's the cognitive standards. Those are the standards that are time tested. And those standards are things that we look at through our observations that we do in classrooms and talking with our principals and our teachers at each school. So that's kind of what made up our pillars. And so if you want to go to the next thing, and I've already kind of covered that. So if you want to go to the next deal, let's go to the next one. So the other part of this is we send out a lot of, and Cognia provided this, but a lot of surveys. So now we're doing quarterly surveys to our stakeholders, to our parents, to our teachers, to our students, and we're getting some very interesting results from those. And that's part of this accountability. So if you want to go to the next slide, and that's just some of the questions. And then the next slide is going to show you what we share out to our public. And so that's kind of our logo, and we share that out. And then all of those links are live. People can click, they can go to the spreadsheets. They can see not only the averages of those scores, if they want to get a little deeper and see how things were individually scored, they can do that. So we try to be really, really transparent in how we share this out. And then if you want to go to the next one, there are things that we have to think about too. That, it's not, everything's not sunshine and rainbows all the time. There are some things you have to think about. And one of that is entering this data is very time sensitive. Collecting the data is time sensitive. It takes time to collect it, but then you also have to enter all of this data. That's a lot. The other thing is making sure that the observations are valid and reliable, so that the data is valid. And so how do you do that? You don't want that just to be from the central office. You need buy-in and ownership. And so we've asked our administrators to go to other schools and do observations so that they're not observing in their school. So there is a lot to it. And then trying to get the public to understand this accountability system takes some marketing and talking, and those kind of things. So there are some things that are hurdles, but they're worth climbing those hurdles, because I truly believe this is the next step if we want to grow students and we want to make them truly college and career ready, truly ready for the real world. This is how you do that. This is how you look at it. And so, it's been a great process for us. I think that our staff and our community are starting to understand it and really buy into it. And I'm looking forward to, this is our version 1.0, and I'm looking forward to 2.0. So thank you all for having us.
Thank you. Do y'all have any questions for?
I would love to request the slides
Yeah.
from both of you so that we can see them, dig down into them just a little bit, because they're intriguing. And congratulations on your new superintendent.
Yes,
Great
thank
guy.
you. Thank you.
I have a question about the community discussions you have. You mentioned the unions coming in and the existing businesses. Is there any discussion within the community about helping kids think about starting their own businesses?
We actually have businesses started within the school now, so we're teaching them how to do that.
Okay.
So I think I do something called a Thursday Thoughts every week for my staff. It started during COVID as a way to stay connected to them, and
Yeah.
I've just kept it going, because now once you start something, right, if it's working, you keep it. And I just sent them the link so that everyone can Christmas shop from our own students. So it's pretty neat, because they will create pretty much anything you want. My Christmas gifts that I'm giving to the board members for Christmas this year, they're hats that they made that, have our logo. It's nice. They're really doing well. I get my oil changed at the automotive shop. I paid my kids I still pay, and sometimes I even give them a tip, but that's a different story. I want to make sure all my tires still work afterwards. You learn in education. You make friends with people who are going to be able to fix your car.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the same with us. We have several student-run businesses, little stores, and different things that they're doing, especially even at the middle school level, where we have some student-run businesses. It's really cool. We have some of our MSD students running a coffee shop at our high school, which is just really, really a neat deal. But I do love the fact that the state has really started to focus on some internships as well. I think that's really, really valuable. And any part of a local accountability system really needs to have that internship factor somewhere in that, because there's just no better experience than to actually get out and do the work. And so you talk about project-based learning, that's that on steroids, right? So it's a great that's a great thing to see when the state kind of started pushing that a little bit.
I'm going to go ahead and surface a concern I have in a way. There's a lot of focus on CTE, which I can see why, and there are a lot of good jobs you can make without four-year degrees, for instance, and others. But do we have students go into CTE and maybe not take the more advanced math and science classes? Because, you used to say you teach people how to run a machine, but now you got to teach them how the machine runs, because there are going to be new machines. And if you have a manufacturer in your county, there's all kinds of opportunities for kids that are bright enough to start up little shops that can make parts for that bigger company, and they can actually help advance the technology. I keep looking for ways that Kentucky can not focus on putting other people's ideas together, but having our own ideas and having our own companies. But I think in that case, it takes, and it's hard to find the counseling you need for a child who's really doesn't know what they can do. But if they're given the chance in some of these harder subjects, they can build up a self-esteem that can carry them further. And Kentucky would be a lot better if some of our own people could come back to Kentucky and start businesses because they love the very place they came from. And so my only concern has been, we talk about all the jobs we've got to fill, but I also think we got to have the ability to make some of our own jobs. And I'm talking mainly about technology-based jobs. With computer science and with the internet, you can start a company anywhere in the world and sell it. And that's why I'm interested in the presentation tomorrow on computer science. We need to offer these kids the opportunity to see how they can compete globally. And I'm not meaning to be demeaning about this, and not just fill the jobs locally. If we have Kentucky kids around the world now, they're doing magnificent things. They're not doing them in Kentucky because we didn't invest in them. But we still are creating kids every year who I think can think deeper. We talk about deeper learning. Deeper learning is the hard stuff, but they can do it. And we got to give them the chance to do it. And so that's only when you used to say when I was in business, you want to be customer driven. Well, the customer is going to want you to do more of what they're already doing. You've almost got to have a vision beyond what your customer's thinking. But you want to build the next thing that they'll buy later. And so that's the higher order push that I guess I think we've got to make sure we do. You're all doing a magnificent job, and this is tough stuff. Trying to change accountability, trying to change how you measure things, involving the community and getting them to buy in, all good stuff. So I admire you. This L3 stuff is great stuff.
Well, and I'll add one thing to that. You know, allowing students to demonstrate their learning in multiple ways and allow them to use that creativity and to use those ideas and be able to show their learning in many different ways that a bubble test necessarily can't do, but give them all kinds of opportunities to show their learning. I couldn't agree more. Is vital to moving our state really forward.
And I would go with exactly what you said. The fact that you're building their confidence and their ability to go out and share what they know makes them more opportunistic to go out and start their own business that necessarily doesn't just serve Greenup County, can serve the whole state or the nation or another country. But it would be great if they wanted to do it in Greenup County where we would have economic development.
Yeah.
So.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Good work.
Well, that concludes our presentations. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
I second.
Second. All right, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.